Welcome to Podband Pipecast, the premier pipe band podcast.
Yay.
Nice. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
This is
Thank you.
Welcome back. A whole week later.
Yeah.
So this is Ed Best. In case you haven't been following along,
Listening to our episodes.
Episodes. There've been some good episodes. So Ed is, as we discussed in our first episode, is a judge quite frequently at pipe band contests all across the country, and North America in general. So
Yes.
today we're going to take you behind the clipboard at what the heck is he thinking when he's writing down all those comments. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so let's just start at the beginning. When did you start judging pipe band contests, and what made you want to judge?
Well, I started judging, I believe it was 2006. It's funny, I was actually asked by the WISPA Music Board to come take the exam and get on the panel. And I'd always kind of been interested in it. I had a little bit of experience because I got asked to, years ago, judge a non-sanctioned event. I'd never done it before, but I kind of got myself organized and I appreciated it. I had been through music school where a lot of what we do is evaluating students. So whether it's their singing, whether it's their instrumental playing. So I had already done similar type of thought process, and what's kind of weird, but my vocal, I'm not a singer like at all, but my vocal teacher in college said that I had one of the best ears and one of the best ways of communicating the pros and cons. So I got an A in singing class, even though I couldn't sing very well, because I improved my singing, but I also got really good at explaining myself through all that stuff. So when I got into the piping stuff, which I know a lot more about than singing, I translated what I learned in that into what I was doing as a judge. So I really enjoy that part of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process of becoming a judge like, and do you have to do anything to keep up your judgeship accreditation?
Process is that you have to have a resume of your own playing accomplishments. I won't go into all of them right now, but I'll just say it's significant. You have to be playing at a high band level for a long period of time. Leadership is helpful. I wasn't a lead drummer, but I was the drum corporal for a grade 2 band for a long time, and I had some significant impact on the musicianship and the music writing in that band, so that counted as leadership. You also had to be a grade 1 or professional, now called open, soloist, which I'd been for a long time also. And you have to, again, they always qualify it with successful. Just putting the number 1 next to your name doesn't necessarily qualify you unless you've done certain things. Playing in being on the roster of a grade 1 band, if you've never stepped on the field, doesn't qualify you necessarily. But anyway, so you have to have a significant resume of your own playing accomplishments at first. They also like people who are teachers because teachers think like judges, right? So they like that I was a teacher. But anyway, the process after you pass the resume section of it is that you have to do 2 main things. You have to go through what's called an apprenticeship, which means you're an apprentice judge, commonly called a shadow judge. So if you're ever at a contest and you see the normal 3 or 4 judges plus 1 extra guy, that's normally a shadow judge. Now, a shadow judge doesn't count. That shadow judge is being evaluated. So as a competitor, even though it's frustrating for everybody involved, you will never see their sheets. Because they're being evaluated on how good of sheets they write. You also get compared to the judge of the day that's judging your category. So when I was a shadow judge, I had to compare my sheets at the end of the day to the actual judge of the day. And you didn't have to agree, but you had to go through and say, we disagreed here and this is why, and we both had to write a little bit as to why we put certain bands or soloists in certain places versus the other one. If we all agreed, it was easy. And we just had to say why we agreed. What do we both think was the reason why this and this and this? The other part of this is, and this is the part that'll get a lot of people, is there's an exam. You have to pass an exam. The drumming test is literally a day of your life. Wow. You can't do this after work. This is a day. So the day I took mine, I went to Las Vegas for the AGM. It was held in Las Vegas that year, the WSPA AGM. And the day after the AGM, we started early in the morning, and the test was literally 8 hours long.
Wow. What were you doing?
I know, right? So I want to know. But you there's a lot of theory questions. There's a lot of situational essay type questions, like if this happens and this happens, what will you do? How will you handle it? And you could tell by the way the questions are formed that these are things that have actually happened, that people have seen, and you have to talk about if and when it happens to you, how you would handle the situation. There's also a lot of listening. You have to know tune styles, time signatures, note values, basic music theory. And then there's a whole section on listening to bands and soloists and writing evaluation sheets. You have to make sure you're thorough and appropriate and address all the different aspects of that performance. So there's certain things there, if you're really good at music theory and understand the stuff, you could rush through. But certain aspects you can't, because you have to listen to the recording and react to it. And then I'll tell you what, the last part I'm going to tell you about is a part that gets more people than anything else. It's the dictation section. So I'm not telling tales here. This is all public information. I'm not giving answers to the tests. But one of the things that happens there is other drummers are in the room with you, and they walk around the room and say, you play 2 measures of a 2/4 march. And then everybody in the room, including the person that played it, has to write down what they just played. They can repeat it as many times as you want to, but it gets recorded and sent off to the person evaluating the exam. And then they say, you play 2 measures of a 3/4 march, then you play 2 measures of a 6/8 jig, and then you play 2 measures of a 4/4 strathspey, and so forth and so on, for about 30 examples. And you have to write down exactly what they played within reason. And then it's recorded and sent off to the person evaluating the test. Now, the person evaluating the test has to also be good at that, because like a lot of the test questions have standard answers or similar answers. This one is going to be unique for every single exam. So there's no way to know the answers ahead of time. Every test is going to be unique. So after that exam, I was pretty tired. Ironically, it was Super Bowl Sunday. And I went to a friend's house in Las Vegas to a Super Bowl party and promptly fell asleep on the floor in front of the television. And people had to step over me to watch the game and get their snacks and whatnot. So that's what kind of test it is. Also, I am a judge with the EUSPBA, the Eastern United States Pipe Band Association. So for them, I actually had to take another exam.
Yay.
But there's reciprocity between the associations. So I was at a Highland Games near Pittsburgh anyway, judging, and I talked to them, and we arranged it so since I was there anyway, the day after I took their exam at the host hotel from the games. So it was quite a bit shorter, but still, it was a significant test I had. It was very similar, but different. It's hard to explain. Different questions, but similar type of content. Both tests were really good. Anyway, so after doing all that, I'm now on both panels. And the other question you asked is about continuing education. In the EUSPBA, I have to show up in person once every 3 years to a seminar. I mean, I'm welcome to show up annually, but I have to show up every 3 years. And if I show up, like I went this year, I had to fly to Philadelphia for a seminar. At the end of the seminar, I was checked off for 3 years. Now, they're going to have another one next year. I'm absolutely welcome to go to it, and my 3 years would start over again.
Okay.
But I don't have to go until another 3 years. WSPBA does not have a requirement for that right now. As of right now, you're on it. But I do know that the music board is looking into making a similar requirement, but it's not official. But they've been looking into it for quite a while, so I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's definitely not a bad idea, actually. Any profession, you have continuing education and just recertifications and things like that. So I think it's completely fair. And yeah, that's what I did. I took tests. I was a shadow judge. Now, to be fair, the EUSPBA recognized my shadow judging and my judging experience from WSPBA, so I didn't have to do the shadowing there.
Mm.
They waived that part for me and let me just take their written exam. And it worked out well because I was in town anyway.
Nice.
So it was nice. So it's nice to being on 2 different panels. It gives me more opportunities to travel and meet new people and keep up with what's going on in the pipe band community.
Yeah, and that makes you really respect judges because they obviously have all been through that and they all have an incredible amount of musical knowledge, you know.
Correct. Yeah, it's a surprising amount. There's more to it than just I have fast hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that a lot of people don't get is that it's a different skill set than being a player. Now, being a good player means they'll look at you to possibly be a good judge, but if you can't communicate, you're not going to be a judge. If you don't know basic music theory, sorry, I don't care how good your hands are, you're not going to be a judge. And the reasoning is if some little kid, this has happened. A little kid is playing for a judge. The judge says, they understand what's going on. They say, oh, in the second part of your march, you blah, 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 blah. And the kid doesn't understand the comment. So they pull out their sheet music, walk up to the judge and say, hey, can you please show me what you meant? And the judge goes, I can't read that. That's a problem because as a judge, for better or for worse, you're put on a pedestal as some form of musical expert. And if you can't speak to a 10-year-old kid in a similar language that they learned in third grade general music class, that's a problem. Either know those terms, understand them well enough to translate them into pipe band terms or something, but just to flat out say, I don't know how to read that, can't help you, is I don't think acceptable at all. So that's what happened. So at one point they actually went through and found out who could read music and who couldn't and who could pass basic music theory tests and thinned out the judging panel. That was 20 some years ago, but still it's a really important to go through this. And, while you're playing for a long, long time, your knowledge base, your experience base, and your communication skills are super important.
Yeah, awesome. So, and this wasn't on the score sheet or anything, or the questions we sent you. I'm sorry, judging on the mind. So you have judged drumming and you've judged ensemble. Could you, at least a contest that I've seen, could you talk about what is the difference? Is there a different test for ensemble, or what is the difference?
Oh, very good. Yeah. I have an ensemble judge also, and yes, it's a separate test. You're not allowed to take the ensemble test until you've been either a piping or a drumming judge for 3 years.
Oh.
So you have to be exclusively one or the other for a while, and then you can take the ensemble exam. Now, there is no when I went through it, I don't know if there's changed that or not, but there was no additional shadow judging required. It was just one more exam, which was significantly shorter because they've already assumed you've passed all the theory aspect of it. So they just got down into the heart of it, how the intercore versus intra-core playing, how things line up, and there's some basic piping knowledge that drummers have to have. There's some basic drumming knowledge that pipers have to have, and there's some training that goes into how to listen to the two cores. But other than that, I didn't have to do any other training per se. I took one class on how to take the test, which is a test prep class. And this is kind of interesting. They tell everybody to put an active ear to your secondary instrument and an inactive ear to your primary instrument. So as a drummer, they want me to have an active ear to the pipers and an inactive ear to the drummers, because as a drummer, I'm going to pretty much catch what's going on. But the piping, I'm going to have to think a lot harder about figuring that stuff out. And the pipers are vice versa. So if you see the ensemble judge walking behind the drummers a lot, there's a good chance that that's a piper. If you see the ensemble judge walking behind the pipers a lot, there's a good chance that's a drummer.
Mm.
That's
So,
interesting.
so that's how it goes. And the other thing that I learned is you don't get into the minutia. You leave that to the piping and drumming judges. You step back. The best example I ever heard of the way somebody explained that was an audience member came up to an ensemble judge and said, "Hey, what are you listening for?" He says, "Well, I'm the ensemble judge. I listen to it the way you listen to it." Like saying it to an audience member. I step back and let the whole sound wash over me. How is it blending together? Ensemble is just French for together. That's all ensemble means. We're all playing together. Now, there's a million ways to interpret what together means, but bottom line is it has to sound good as one big cohesive unit. And if you step back and you listen to it and it has a nice big sound and has a lot, and all the drumming and piping are related to each other, you don't have to get into, like, I don't have to talk about, unless it's really bad, roll quality and flat flams and talking about, grace noting and all that other stuff. I let the piping and drumming judges handle that. But if there's a major imbalance between the cores, there's major dissonance between the cores, or whatever, that's something that the ensemble judge can talk about.
Interesting.
What's really cool about being the ensemble judge is sometimes as a drumming judge, you hear something in the piping and it's either really positive or really negative, and you really want to say something, but you can't because it's not your category. As an ensemble judge, if I hear something, no matter what, good or bad, I can talk about it if it's significant enough, I can talk about it on my sheet. And I really like that. And it's kind of cool because it lets me step back and listen to the whole band as a band, not watching the drummer's hands for all their technical issues and positives and negatives. It's kind of fun to listen to the band for musicality's sake. I really enjoy that aspect of it when I get a chance to do ensemble. Unfortunately, as a drummer, there are rarely more than one drumming judge on site. So while I could do ensemble, nobody else on site usually can do the drumming also. So they say, "Hey, could you do ensemble today?" And I say, "Yes." "Who's going to do the drumming?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, right, forgot." So that's a problem. So I could do ensemble, but somebody else would have to do the drumming. But when the times that there's been two drumming judges on site, it's fantastic because we take turns and we enjoy the change up. So I do like judging ensemble.
Yeah, I've noticed sometimes they do that. They'll say if there's a 2-day contest, someone will judge drumming one day and ensemble the next, and then they'll swap.
And it happens with the pipers too. So if they're certified in piping and ensemble, they'll flip-flop 2 judges on the second day in the piping as well for the same reason. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice total change up for the way that the judge listens to the band. And it's nice to have that variety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what is your favorite part of pipe band judging?
Honestly, my favorite part is getting to see what different bands are doing across the country. I had a really good opportunity last year to judge at the Alma, Michigan games, which is probably the second biggest games in the Midwest next to the Chicago games, I think. Anyway, don't quote me on that. But anyway, it's a big one. It's one of the biggest ones in the area. It's similar in the West Coast to saying you're going to Costa Mesa. It's a fairly large game. It's not the biggest, but it's still very significant and large. And I was the drumming judge that was brought in to judge that one. And it was very interesting comparing what in our bubble on the West Coast we look at as a grade 5 band or a grade 4 band or a grade 3 band and grade 2. And then there they had their grade 5, 4, 3s, and 2s also. Sometimes the West Coast had significantly better bands in one grade and then worse there. And then sometimes it was absolutely flipped. So it's very interesting to get outside of, my bubble, where I am most often. You think this is the way the world is, and you realize it's not. And I love getting outside and meeting new people and seeing old friends, but also just seeing what different bands are doing in different areas. It's the opportunity to travel around and not hear the same bands all the time. I mean, I love the bands I get to hear on a regular basis, but at the same time, I love hearing what other bands are doing, what other regions are doing. I've had a chance to go to the South, Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, Northwest. I'm all over the place, and it's so cool. It's their own little pockets of the best and the worst in those areas, and not just good and bad, but just different ideas, different styles, different sounds. And I just find it absolutely fascinating to get to do that and just have a broader knowledge of what's going on, which helps me when I come help my own students, because I have a better idea of what's expected throughout the country. And then this year I'm going to go over and do the same thing in Scotland and have a chance to, not judging, but going over and listening to all the different bands and seeing what they're doing over there to get a broader perspective.
Mm-hmm. What is the
I don't like bubbles.
No bubbles. No bubbles for Ed.
No, bubbles are bad.
Only in sparkling wine, right?
I'll take.
So what is the most challenging part of pipe band judging?
I have to say the most challenging part, and I say this with all the love in the world, is judging the lower grade bands. Because, and by definition, a lower grade band would be the least experienced band. So one band is really good at one thing and not so good at another. And then the second band is reverse that. And we don't have a rubric to say your flams are better than their 5-stroke rolls, you win, because it's not that simple. How much better are your flams than their 5-stroke rolls? You're a very steady tempo, but you have better roll quality. You have good singles, but you have good flams. And then everybody has something they're extremely weak at also. So, and again, just by definition, a grade 5 band is going to have both strengths and weaknesses and be a little bit inconsistent just by the sheer fact of being new. So one of the most challenging thing is coming up with my own consistent rubric that I try to use. So if you get me as a judge, I'm very consistent with what I reward and what I don't reward. I've had to do that because it's impossible to get all the judges to agree on that. We discuss it, and it's like there's so many gray areas in the beginner band. Now, at the same time, that's very rewarding because I get to write a sheet that will hopefully give them some pointers as to what to do at the next rehearsal to help them get up to the next level. So while it's challenging, when I nail something that's going to help them and I help them with it, it's very rewarding for me. I've had several of them, even though I give them last place, I give them a helpful hint and they come and thank me afterwards. So they come in with really good attitudes. They're looking for help. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but that's one of the judges' jobs also, is to help the competitors, not just give you first through 10th or whatever. You have to actually give constructive feedback. And the hardest thing is giving the constructive feedback that's going to help them the most. If I just list all the stuff they do wrong, it's not helping. But what's the comment I'm going to give that's going to help them the most and give them the feedback as to why they got the place they got? So that's the challenge when everybody has something good and everybody has something they need to work on. And it's always very different.
I also just have to say, we did an exercise at our band rehearsal a couple weeks ago, right before our contest, that just to get used to some of the new players getting used to being judged. And so we had some of our players walk around with clipboards as they're playing their medley, and we're writing comments. And I was one of the people with the clipboard, and I was having to write comments, and it is hard. I just have to say, incredible respect to all the judges out there, because I just wanted to listen. And then I realized, oh crap, I got to listen and write. And I just forgot what I heard, and now I just heard something else. And
yeah, so along that same lines, exactly. I remember when I was shadow judging, my very first shadow judging, the chairman of the music board at the time was standing outside the circle as a spectator watching. And he saw the look on my face as I'm walking around writing stuff. And he just leaned in and he goes, harder than it looks, isn't it? I'm like, So I don't think it's challenging per se if you take it with the right attitude, but my message to everybody out there is don't be a grammar Nazi going over the judges' sheets. Somebody's going to misspell a word. They're going to have a sentence fragment. They're going to use the, affect instead of effect. You know what they mean. Move on. Because they don't have time to go back and redo it and proofread and make it a perfect little, master's thesis. They have a couple minutes to get a few thoughts down and then move on. At the same time, though, even after all that, you've got to keep a running tally of the bands or the soloists. So the hardest thing for new judges, and this is part of the shadow process, is the experienced judges saying, hey, let me show you the process I use to keep track of the bands. And everybody has their own little system of some kind of little chart or some kind of little notation or whatever they do on a separate little scratch paper. Almost every judge has a secret scratch paper that they destroy immediately following the contest, because it's all the little notes that they don't want anybody to read. They're just meant for the judge personal notes, and then they destroy it, and we move on with the results of the contest. That's one of those dirty little judge secrets. We all have some kind of sheet as we were figuring out, nobody wants to see, I had him in first, but I changed my mind and put him third. So it's nothing bad. It's just, you don't want to see that process, even though I'm comfortable with the process at the end.
Yeah, they used to do the thing on Whisper with score sheets. I don't know if they do that anymore, where they would tell you how many points each judge gave each band, which was weird because points don't actually mean anything. I mean,
Nothing.
You might get 50 points from one judge and 80 from another. It's just the way that they help themselves tally the scores, right?
It's irrelevant, yeah. So, now all you get is the placing. Now, to be fair, I give points on my own private tally sheet. It's just a way to separate the bands. So if a band comes out first on and they're really, really good, I might give them a 75, 70. But who knows? Then the next band on, I always leave like a 10-point gap in between each band. So the fact that they get a 30 doesn't mean it's bad. It's not really bad. I just leave it a big gap because the next band that comes on could be between the band that got the 30 and the 40. So they get a 35. So I have to leave a little gap there. So at the end of the contest, I'll actually go through and rewrite all the bands in order and see if it still makes sense to me. I'll go back and reread all my sheets, make sure the comments and the placings, the CPLs all match the placings that I have come up with at the end. I was even talking to a judge one time who was furious with himself. He lost sleep because he felt that he messed up this grade 4 contest. He was one of the piping judges, and he flip-flopped 5th and 6th place, and he lost sleep over it.
Oh.
So just so you guys know, the judges care. I mean, it's also funny because the judges out there, the hard part for me is I'm actually rooting for everybody. Like, I want them to do well. I'm not like waiting for, come on, make a mistake, please. Nobody does that. We're like, come on, you got this, you got this. And if there's a mistake, like a big clunk, you're like, you could almost just, your heart sinks for the band because you just know it was so close to being such a good performance, and to have a major error or a major, malfunction somewhere is hard on the judges. So you have to realize the judges are out there to help you. The judges are there to give you good feedback, and they're pulling for you. So anytime that happens, nobody's happy. They're not happy to give you, nobody's waiting to thrash you. The conversations behind the scene are always, positive, like, helping everybody along. It really is very a positive scene behind the curtain, if you will, with the judges. Everybody's really pulling for the competitors.
That's good to know.
So after judging for as long as you have, is there anything you get bored of hearing or seeing season after season, particularly tunes, techniques, or other cliches?
Honestly, especially in the lower grades, I don't get tired of hearing good tunes played well. So if you're really good at Green Hills and Scott and the Brave, I would be thrilled to listen to you play that all day. I've heard bands come out playing Rowan Tree and Wings and, whatever, similar stuff. I'm like, it sounds so good. They're relaxed. They're in tune. They're confident. And I'll never get tired of hearing that. That's what you want. I do get tired of, and I think I mentioned this on the last episode a little bit, bands thinking they're going to impress you by playing some tricky thing that they just mess up. If you're not ready for it, don't do it. In public, anyway. I'm not saying don't push yourself, but practice in private. Go back to your garage, play there, try a new idea until you've got it all worked out. You're not gonna magically get it. It's like everybody thinks they're in some kind of one of those sports movies where you get the ball at the end and you're gonna win at the last second. And you're not. You're not the star of that movie where you catch the football and make the touchdown for the first time ever at the Super Bowl. That doesn't happen. So you go to the field. If you're not prepared for it, you're going to mess it up. If you're nervous and worrying about that bit coming up, you're going to mess it up. Play what you're comfortable with. And that's the same, honestly, for any grade. People go up a grade, and they think they got bit by radioactive spiders. Like went from a 4 to a 3 or a 3 to a 2. You're the same people you were yesterday. I can write any number I want next to your name. You're the same person you were. Mm-hmm. You have the same abilities as you did yesterday. Whatever you did. And so, like, if you got a promotion, congratulations. That's fantastic. It's obviously you're doing something right. Stick with it. Don't change your game plan because now I'm in grade whatever. Now I have to blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. You have to do the same thing you were doing in the first place that got you promoted. Don't change the whole game plan because you got moved up a grade. Now, if you're together that long, and you want to push yourself a little bit, fair enough. But have the humility to know when it's too much or not enough. So to kind of come back to the question, the thing I don't like is people trying to impress judges by playing something too hard that they can't play. Mm. I never get tired of hearing simple tunes played really, really well. I've rewarded bands in grade 2 because they had fantastic sounds, but it was a little bit slower, a little bit simpler, but they were incredible. Okay, you win. Bands have to try really hard stuff, and they're messing it up. And then you hear the band that lost, but that's not fair. They played easier stuff. I'm like, maybe you should try that. You played stuff too hard. No points for trying. You get points for doing. Mm-hmm. So try in the background. I mean, always push yourself, but put in public what you're already good at. Nice. And again, I know I already talked about this last week, but the secret to the top bands is they put in public what they're already good at. The drum scores are written because the lead drummer knows his or her players and what they're good at, and there's stuff that they're not good at. And guess what? They don't write that stuff in there, at least not until they're ready for it. Mm-hmm. Ask any of them. They all have a move that they wish they could do that they just can never quite pull off. Same. So guess what? It's not in there. Don't show it off. No. Practice, maybe the warm-up. Let's go through that rudiment. Let's go through that new flourish. Let's go through that new tune. Okay, but it's not ready yet, so you don't put it in public. Mm-hmm. That's my thing. I want to hear what you're already doing well. Mm-hmm. Period.
So I think you may have already answered this question. This may be the same answer, but is there anything else that you've seen in contests, without picking on anyone, of course, that is definitely do not do this sort of thing? What not to do at a pipe band contest?
Okay, so this is I'll answer this question a different way. And I actually had a grade 2 pipe major answer this in a class for me, more direct than I've ever been. If you're not a pipe band drummer, don't write drum scores. Mm. Don't think you're going to impress us by putting this newfangled twist on it because what you learned in your high school marching band. Mm. It will not work. I'm not saying there can be no influences. I'm not saying don't ever try something new. I'm not saying don't, be experimental. But you have, there's an old saying about the envelope. You want to push the envelope. Well, some people need to learn where the edges of the envelope are in the first place, mm-hmm. right? So if you don't know where the boundaries are, you don't know how to push them. So you learn the boundaries first, you learn the style, and then once you reach a certain level, you try to push it. I used to tell people, you can try it, but you try to throw it past somebody who knows what they're doing. And this one particular grade 2 pipe major was in the class. He had to answer the question before I got to it, and he's like, no. There's certain things you're looking for, and you don't know what they are. You don't get to write them. Pass it off to any number of other people to write them. So don't think you're going to impress anybody, again, by trying a new style, because the judges understand it. Mm-hmm. They're not going to like it, but they'll understand it. So if you're not a pipe band drummer, don't be writing the drum scores for your band. And I don't want to hear, well, I didn't know anything. You have Google. You can type in Scottish drumming teachers or pipe band drumming teachers or whatever. I do it, but I also know dozens of other people who do it, who do a fantastic job. And it's like, you need to talk to them. and find out what they're looking for. You get surprised sometimes. So that would be my thing, is don't try to impress us with whatever you learned in your junior high concert band. It's just not going to happen. Sorry.
No, that's a great time to remind everyone of, if you didn't watch the last episode, go back and definitely check that out. Ed talks about how he has videos on YouTube, and he gives private instruction on Skype and just all kinds of things. Find a teacher. That's one thing we talked about before. Definitely don't go it alone. Find a teacher.
Find a teacher, find a mentor, find a coach, whatever term you're comfortable with, and find out somebody who's done this their whole life as you're coming in trying to mimic it. It's funny, I talk to people, they come in and they try to mimic the sound and they do whatever they're going to do. And there's a couple points I want to make on that, is they come in and they get their hands moving and they try to play these drum scores, and they don't know the style. And so if you can think of a hybrid, like a mix, a fusion, if you will, between like rudimental, like marching, like American rudimental drumming and jazz. It's neither one, but there's elements of both. There's similarities, but it's also completely different. So when you mix them together, you don't recognize it as either one, but there's elements of both, and there's a lot of good swing, there's a lot of good rudiment work, and there's different techniques that you use to get them. So you have to approach it as it's not jazz, it's not the same thing you learned in your high school marching band, but it's a combination, a fusion of both.
Jazz fusion.
Jazz, American rudimental fusion. The inventor of our style of drumming was a big band era drummer in his day. Not just, I liked it, I heard it on the radio, I thought it was kind of cool. He actually took the swing and stuff that he did there and put it into pipe band drumming, and you have to approach it from that aspect.
If you don't know who he's talking about, Google Alex Duthert. You need to know if you're
Alex
a drummer,
Duthert.
and if you're a
Sure.
piper also.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey guys, it's producer Alex here, just coming in to tell you this is the end of part 3 of our interview with Ed Best. Part 4 is coming next week. Like I said, in part 1 we didn't do any intros and outros for some of these episodes, so I'm just coming in here letting you know the episode's over. Don't freak out. It's done. It's over. It's all right. Just calm down.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this show, then support us on Patreon for exclusive content, as well as the video of us recording this. We'll have special exercises we'll be writing, as well as tips and tricks with tenor drumming and other instruments to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube for some tenor tutorials and possibly other tutorials later on. And like us on Facebook at Podband Pipecast.